Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today I'm joined by Jairek Robbins. He's a best-selling author of Live It, Achieve Success by Living with Purpose, and an award-winning performance coach whose focus, like mine, has been on optimizing human potential. Fast Company calls him inspiring, says it'll make your life less ordinary, but more than that, he's an entrepreneur, and I know family is super important to him, and his message about making every day count, living life and business on your own terms, is what I know many of us will resonate with. So without further ado, Jairek, welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. You're a busy man. I've been looking forward to this for so long, watching your journey. And some people out there may not know who you are yet. It is unbelievable, but they may not know who you are and haven't kept up with your recent reset. So who are you and what are you focused on today?
Who am I? So family man, head over heels in love with my wife, a father to our son who's 3 now. World traveler, adventurer, explorer. We just got back from Cape Town. We're looking into buying some property on a game reserve down there and help be a conservationist of sort, conserve the rhinos and the elephants and all the animals who are on the reserve there. Explorer, surfer, all kinds of fun stuff.
And what's taking up the most of your time at the moment? Obviously, you've got some new roles for success.com, I think. Like, is that the main focus or it's still the family? What drives you day to day at the moment?
No, I just wrapped up that role, to be honest. It was a brand new reset. Yeah, it was a year and a half. I just got done with that project. I came in, reorged their coaching department. We grew it by 300% year over year, got it profitable, got it ready to scale. And then I'm done. I'm not a corporate guy. I can consult, but I have no interest in having a job. We've been a business builder for 14 years now. So we have multiple companies of our own. We have teams all over the world. We have clients in 127 countries around the world. We've built a life and a business that we love. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to spend our time mainly on 2 things right now. One, we have a new program coming to life, Core 4 Challenge, which is just helping people on their health, so mind, body, emotions, their relationships, which Harvard says is the number one factor that determines how long you live, how happy you are, how much you make, is how well you're able to build and cultivate relationships. So we help them in their health, their relationships, their career. How do we get you to perform at your absolute peak? How do we maximize your productivity, help you get more done in less time type stuff, and find more purpose and meaning in it? I remember I was living in a village in Uganda, and I was doing an interview yesterday, and he asked, what did you learn from living in a village in Uganda? I said, it was really interesting. There was this little old man that lived in a broom closet of a clinic just outside where I was staying in an old broken down schoolhouse. And every morning I'd wake up and watch the sunrise, and this little guy would be there every day. Exactly the same time, exactly the same way. He would walk out to the porch, have this long thatch broom, and he'd, stretch his back and then kind of lean over and like take a step and sweep and take a step and sweep and take a step and sweep. And he'd work his way down this long dirt road, get all the leaves off it, and then work his way all the way back. And at the end, he'd stand back on the porch, set the broom down and stand there. And he had like the biggest smile on his face that I've ever seen. And I just watched him. And first few days, it's like, okay, great. He's the janitor or the groundskeeper. Good for him. Who cares? And when it got to like 35 days, 40 days in a row, 45 days, I'm like, dude, this guy never misses. He's got like some type of routine.
You don't know, like what's going on. Yeah.
But the wild part was he was so damn happy about it. That was the curiosity of like, he's always so freaking happy about that. Like the smile on his face was infectious. And I went and interviewed him, and went and asked him. I had someone translate because he didn't speak English and I didn't speak the local language well enough to do it. And so I asked him, why do you do what you do? And he, she asked him the question and he said something back to her and she looked at me and he said, because I'm supposed to. And I was like, no, why? 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 And if you ever travel with an American, for some reason, when people don't understand us, we think we just weren't talking loud enough. So I said, no, why do you do what you do? And she's like, I speak English, stupid. Hold on. Let me ask you. So she turned to him and she said something different. And then all of a sudden that smile just boom was on his face. And I was like, what is that? And she said, wow, that was beautiful. I'm like, tell me. She's like, hold on, chill out. And I was like, what did he say? And he said, the reason I sweep the leaves every morning is because I believe every human, whether it's a sick or elderly person about to leave this world or a child about to enter this world, I believe every person deserves a clear path to do so. And I remember just sitting there and going, wow, that's a whole lot of purpose for something that's seemingly so simple.
Yeah.
And then I had like that moment in a movie where it's like a flashback. And I just thought of all the people I've met in my life who go to work every day. And I listen to what they say about their work, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, whether it's a business owner or someone who works the front desk or any position. I hear them talk about it. Same old shit, just another day, getting through it, surviving. And I hear all this nonsense that they say, and then I compare it to this dude who lives in a broom closet in Uganda, who's clearing a path for humans to enter and exit the world through. And I'm like, God, he's so much happier than all of them. I wish they could be that happy. And so in the career part, we talk about, there's this thing that Yale University created called job crafting of how do we rewrite your career path in a way that you actually get to experience that kind of joy every day, doing what you're already doing. You don't have to change jobs. People think I have to go change my job to find my passion. I'm like, no, you don't. You have to find your passion in your job because here's the truth. You can change as many jobs as you want, but you'll realize the problem ain't the job. The problem's you. It's kind of like you keep dating a bunch of people and you're like, none of these people work out. And you realize you're the only common factor. Same thing here. You can change as many jobs as you want. And sure, maybe you find something special, but for most people, they're going to realize they're the only common factor. And they're going to have to work on the inside psychology in order to find that kind of purpose and joy in what they do. The final part is wealth. Wealth. This is interesting. I remember I was working with this large group of entrepreneurs who, as a company, they're generating $185 billion a year in sales, and they're all top performers. And one of their top people got on stage and said, if you're striving for balance in your life, you're striving to be broke. I was like, God.
That's healthy, isn't it? Yeah, that's all
burnout. Who
burnout.
lets people like this talk to groups of people? I'm like, get that person off the stage. And you just hear this, you're like, wow, people convince each other of dumb shit. And I was like, God. And then the thought that goes with this is, I think she or someone else told me, they're like, rich people don't sleep 8 hours a night. And I was like, you're right. But wealthy people do.
They speak 12, 20, whatever they want, right? That's the whole point. They have the freedom to choose. Whole different game.
That's right. And so when we talk about wealth, it's not just money. People get confused and think wealthy means rich. And rich, I've met a lot of people who have a lot of money and they're divorced and their kids don't like them. And, the only thing they do on the holidays is work. And their doctor has them on a special meal plan. And if they deviate from the meal plan, they're told they're going to die. I'm like, that's not wealthy. That's someone who sacrificed everything in their life to get a net worth or a bank account. And the truth is they're going to spend the rest of their life spending the bank account to try to get those other pieces back. And so if you look at that concept, wealthy comes down to time freedom, which is the real valuable thing in life. You can't get that back. 2 is financial freedom. You need that as well to be able to do all the things you want to do nowadays. And then the third part is purpose and meaning. I hung around enough people who have more than enough time and more than enough money. And what they're yearning for is impact or purpose or meaning, something worth doing, something more than just themselves. They're looking for, I read in a book, it was called The Second Mountain. And it talked about how the first mountain in life is what you can get from life. And the second mountain is what you can give to life. And so what that group of people is looking for is their second mountain. What can I give back to life in a way where it's truly fulfilling?
And that's why we have you on the show. So firstly, love you. That's why you're here, right? You're living this, not the outside pretend version. And so much of the industry that, quote, helps people isn't that conversation, right? You and I know that. But let's go a bit back and how you became who you are today. So if you look back on your life till now, what have been the biggest shifts and resets you've been through?
Biggest shifts and resets. So I always look at pivotal moments or pivotal people that played a role. And I look at some of the people in my life and what are the major lessons I learned from those people. And so, if I were to take my top 3 people, I always start with my mom. And she was someone who just loved with all of her heart. And she cared. And the crazy part was she gave even when she didn't have anything to give. Like, she was a wonderful person and super loving, but in the financial category, always struggled. And I remember she had the psychology around money where she'd pay off $500 from her max out balance credit card and then tell me, honey, I have $500. If you need anything, just let me know.
Wow. Okay.
I was like, oh boy. And so it was that concept of over giving, too much giving. But I learned it doesn't matter what you have. You can still take care of people around you. You can still love on them. You can still care about them. You can still give, even when you feel like you have nothing. And what's funny is when you do give, it reminds you of how much you do have. And you find out you're much wealthier, much richer than you thought. Even if it's just a little bit, it reminds you of how much abundance really exists in your life. And so I always start with mom, just caring. Number 2, I always go to my grandma. She was someone who she, grew up in her day and time. There was a pool in Los Angeles, and they'd let the colored kids, which she was part of, swim. And then after they'd bleached the pool before they let the white kids in so that they didn't get dirty kind of stuff. And it's like, geez, grandma.
Yeah, different time.
Luckily. And women didn't work back then kind of thing. So she raised 5 kids and grandpa worked. And then eventually women started to work in history. So she became a secretary because that's what women did. And then you fast forward and eventually she got into sales. And what was wild about that is she became the #1 producer in every sales team she ever worked on. And I remember I used to go into her office and she had a wall with every plaque from every company. She had the key to the city of Los Angeles. She was on the cover of Newsweek magazine. Like, damn. And I always asked her, I'm like, what's your secret sauce in all this? And even when she was in her, I think 82, 83, she would still do an outbound cold calling 3 days a week. So I always tease people on a sales team. I'm like, if you're not cold calling, like phone book, directory, picking up and dialing for dollars type thing, if you're not doing that at least 3 days a week, my grandma at 82 is kicking your ass. And so from her, though, the lesson I really learned is she always tell me it's not the hand you're dealt, it's how you play it. She's like, it doesn't matter what hand you're dealt. You can be the best hand in the world or worst hand in the world. It's learning how to play the hand you're dealt, period. Life ain't fair. Take what you have and figure out how you can maximize it. I was like, I love that. It was such a great grandma life lesson. And she's the one who taught me business. I remember when I was 5, I used to lick envelopes with her and go to meetings. She had me in a suit doing a full presentation for life insurance sales when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So she taught me. She took me with her everywhere and got me into doing presentations and stuff like that. And then I go to my dad. I think my dad is awesome as far as the lesson I learned from him is possibilities. What's possible? And he was someone when he was, 17 years old, my grandma his mom, kicked him out of the house. He was living in the back of his car when he met my mom, kind of thing. And then you fast forward to where he is today, and he's got, I don't know, 100 and something companies with 60 billion under management and all these things. It's insane. It's insane. And if you watch that leap of what's possible in a lifetime, and the neat part isn't what he's been able to achieve, it's what he's been able to give in my eyes. I remember this is where him and my mom got along, which was caring, where when he was first really going after it in life, he did a speech for a bunch of fifth graders. I think there was like 100 of them. And at the end, he just felt like he needs to help them expand what's possible in their life, expand the vision of possibility. And these kids were in Houston, Texas, where the dream was like, get a job at McDonald's when you graduate. At least they have benefits kind of stuff. And he was like, we need to give them a bigger, brighter future than that. Compelling vision. And so he's walked out of the room, shook his head, walked back in. He says, you know what? Let's come up with some rules, good citizen rules. Be average, community service, be a good person, don't go to jail, like just good citizen rules. He goes, if you stick to these all the way through high school, I'll pay for every one of your college educations. And he walked out of the room and his lawyer called him and said, do you know how much money you just promised those people? And he goes, I don't care. If they do their part, I'll do my part. And what's interesting is if you watch how much he grew in his own business, in his own life, as him as a person, in his own finances, it was exponential based on how much he was giving. Fast forward, I know he made a deal with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and I think Abu Dhabi later a few years ago. And they were doing a deal where he had committed to feeding 1 billion people over all these years. And I think he's on track at 800 million people fed or something of these last 8 years. And then he did a deal with the Crown Prince and one of the kings or one of the royal family where they're going to double down together and make it 100 million meals a year forever based on the investment they're doing together. I was like, that's so cool. Like they're providing 100 million meals a year forever to groups of people who are hungry and struggling to get access to food. And so to me, to know at one point in his life, he didn't have access to go get food and he was living in the back of his car. And at this stage of his life, he's only 63, now feeding 100 million people a year for fun. It's like, what a transformation. What a reminder of what's really possible in life if you really go for it. And so I look at those lessons of care. Just care about yourself, care about others, care about all the people you cross paths with. Play the hand you're dealt. Take whatever life gives you and figure out how to play it and maximize the opportunity. And then the third part, remember what's possible. What's possible. Use this phrase. If you ever see someone and your brain tries to compare, just say, hey, they're playing the same game at a different level. I got to figure out how to level up.
Love those. I'm making a few notes. You got me thinking back to a man. I'm not sure how much you spent time with him, Jim Rohn. Did you spend much time live with Jim back in the day?
I didn't get to spend a lot of time with Jim. My dad and my mom both worked with Jim when they were like 17 years old.
I'm the same. I sort of missed having the live time, but indirectly. And you see, I hear a lot of Jim in you and those ripples. And it's what's really fascinating, sort of not a pause dot reset question, maybe just for a second we can dig into it. There's so much amazing knowledge, amazing examples that weren't there 100 years ago, right? Your grandmother, phenomenal. That wasn't my grandmother's story. Like she was a washerwoman, small, like a different world. The boundaries have been so shifted, and yet we still have 8 billion people, of which 7.9 billion are not there. You know, there's a big gap. I'm just curious, like what you think has to change for that to really shift.
The illusion that everyone needs to be the same. I think one of the coolest things in the world is traveling. We just got back from Cape Town. We were down there for 5 weeks, and we're actually looking to buy a place down there now. And so being somewhere that's different than where you're used to, better or worse, doesn't matter. There's things that are amazing in every place. There's things that are challenging in every place you go. But the ability to just pick yourself up, move yourself to another part of the world and drop in reminds you that everyone doesn't need to be the same. Everyone doesn't need to do what you do. And the beauty of sitting in their world. I met a gentleman named Freddie. He just had a sparkle in his eye. He was a head maitre d' or waiter at a restaurant we went to. And I just looked at him and he had a sparkle in his eye. And my wife was asking everyone we were there, like, oh, where are you from? And it happens to be a very global city. Like there's people from everywhere in the world there. And he grew up in Congo. He migrated from Congo to Zambia and then to Zimbabwe and then to South Africa because of war going on in Congo. And he didn't want to get drafted and put into the army. So he migrated and moved himself around and then eventually brought his wife and child down. And when we talked to him and heard about his life, there's beauty in it of him finding how to move to another place without knowing anybody, finding some work, finding the ability to add value in the community, finding the ability to produce a safe place to live for himself and get a steady income going, and then start off as a runner and then become a waiter and then become a manager and then become the head of the whole crew. Finding his local community to tap into in church and all the things he believes in and loves. And being able to talk with someone and experience their journey and experience their story that's so different than what you might be used to. It kind of reminds us how beautiful life is. Now, the only part that bugs me, that I don't like, is when I hear the piece, and I heard there's a bunch of, it's so hard to find work here. It's so hard to find work here. Now, I've heard that a lot of places. I've heard that in South Africa. I've heard that when I lived in Uganda. I've heard that when I've traveled through the UK. I've heard that when I lived in Southern California or now here in Puerto Rico on the island. I hear the same story. It's so hard to find work. And then I hear the second part. These people are coming here and stealing our jobs. If you're in South Africa, it's the people from Zimbabwe stealing your jobs. If you're in the UK, it's the people from Eastern Europe or Poland stealing your jobs. If you're in Texas or Southern California, it's the people from Mexico stealing your jobs. If you're in Costa Rica, it happens to be the people from Nicaragua. Like, there's a narrative, there's a story. And that story causes so much friction between groups of people. We asked a young woman working at a cafe. South Africa made a ruling that said by the end of the month, if you don't have your papers, you have to be out of South Africa from Zimbabwe. There's xenophobia or xenophobia going on. And we asked the young lady, she goes, I'm really worried because we don't have our stuff yet. We're trying to get it done, but we might not hit the deadline. And my wife says, well, what's the penalty if you don't hit the deadline? And the young woman looked at her and her eyes got really big and she said, there will be war. We were like, oof, wow. Like not, and when she walked away, my wife was like, is that like hypothetically? I'm like, oh no, not here.
Yeah, they mean
not here. Like that'll get real messy real fast in this part of the world. And I thought about it though. And one of the things that speaks to my heart is like, wow, what could we share with people? What could we just give to people in a moment like that allows them to earn a living, to take care of the ones they love from anywhere in the world and not have to be stuck in this frame of reference of there's no work here? How do you give someone that skill set? How do you give them tools, life tools, business tools? How do you give them the right skills in life? And that was something that if you go all the way back, Jim Rohn taught my mom and dad that. My mom and dad taught me that. My grandma reminded me of that. How do you add so much value to the world around you that you become instantly valuable, no matter where you are on earth? And I remember I spent a good portion of my youth learning skills for that exact reason. I always had this weird thought that if something crazy happened in the world and we had to pack up and move on just overnight, we find out tomorrow we got to go now. Pack up our stuff, we're moving. Now it's becoming a little more real, that statement. Back then, people would laugh at me and go, that'll never happen. But right now, what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia kind of stuff, what's going on in South Africa, what's going on in other parts of the world, that's a very real statement. I have friends whose family, when Iran went through a revolution, that was real. You had to pack your suitcase. You had to grab whatever you could, put it in 1 or 2 bags, and you had to move. That was it. And you had tonight to get it done. Leave everything else behind kind of deal. And they did. And the question is, when you land somewhere new, without speaking the language, without knowing anybody, without having any point of reference, have you gained the life skills or business skills or some skills that allows you to add value to the community in where you land? And here's the asterisk, that within 24 hours, you'd have a safe, warm place to live. Within a week, you would be able to add so much significant value that the community would now start to champion you and help you get going. Within a few months, you'd have more than an abundant life already moving in the right direction. Now, I always say the scary part is there's some people who lived in the same town their whole life and still haven't figured that shit out. And they know everybody. But here's the thought. Could you learn the type of life skills that would allow you to have that kind of freedom? Because at that point, you're not dependent on what kind of job is available. You're dependent on, who can I go add value to? Who can I make a difference for today?
Love that. And especially with the lockdown that went on, it got really weird, right? Here in the UK, you literally couldn't leave your house.
Totally.
And cyber world's so different. Like you and I have never actually been in the same place and gone, hello, we've got some mutual connections, never actually had those live meetings. So I think I got a sense of the answer to this next question. We talk about pausing, stopping, and resetting, right? Pausing, you do something, take a break and go back to it. Stopping, you just put the brakes on, momentum's gone, and reset, whole new game. I get a sense you love the brand new game. You love resetting. Is that the case for you? Like that's the easy one? Or which one's the hardest for you? Do you find it hardest to pause, to stop, or to reset? What's the hard thing in your vocabulary? I know they're all easy for you, I'm sure. But
I mean, recently I just went through all three, literally. I was a year into my work with success. Things were really working, but it just I quickly learned I am not built to be a corporate employee. Yeah. I didn't need a 12-year career to figure that out. Like a year into it, I'm like, this ain't for me. I did my work. I did what I told you I would do. I got you the results and better than what I said would happen. I'm done. I'm going to wrap this up and move on. They asked me to stay a few more months and onboard the new CEO before I left, which we did. We figured all that out, got it set. I'm in my exit. So that was the pause, ain't for me. The stop, this is over. And then the reset. The reset, we went to South Africa and spent 5 weeks in Cape Town just resetting, just family time. Waking up, going for walks. It was cold down there, but going for walks, being outside, going on a safari together, exploring, driving all over the country, seeing the penguins, seeing the animals, just completely resetting to come back and then dive into our businesses.
No, I get that. And you've obviously, he said you got skilled up as a young age. I can't imagine many of us doing those life insurance sales conversations at that space, that confidence, that certainty. I'm just curious, like if you could, obviously your child now 3 years old, what are the most important lesson you wish you could give your younger self and why?
I mean, with him, I've learned this through experience. You learn so much more by just moving throughout the world than you do trying to read books or use the internet to learn about the world. And so there's so many lessons just living, just being, just going out and doing things and having them work out, having them not work out, having them go better than imagined, having them turn out way worse than imagined. The process of being in life it is the key. I think the biggest struggle that I've noticed so many people have is usually the story, the narrative, the conversation in their own head of, I was just talking to a client and he's like, hey, I'm better than the situation I'm stuck in. I'm better than this. And I was like, oh, that's going to create so much pain and angst and frustration and misery in your own head. What if you just said, I'm wildly skilled, and if this is what life is handing me, screw it, let's figure it out. It's a mental shift that then creates a whole different reality for you to walk through each day. And so knowing that skill, knowing that tool, it's a practice. We have a little 3-year-old who's a wonderful human, and he can be a baby terrorist at times where he demands things. Last night, his mom, my wife was sitting down and she's like, I'm eating. And he's like, I don't want you to eat. I want you to come play with me.
Wow.
They're like, oh boy. And so we've been teaching him an attitude of gratitude. where we'll give him something. He's like, I don't want this. I want that. And I'm like, okay, let's practice being grateful for what you have. Otherwise, you're not going to have anything. And we've been practicing this with him. And what he's learning is when you're grateful, life gives you more. And when you're ungrateful, life takes some shit away. And so we're training that behavior into him by teaching him that piece. Now, what I hope doesn't happen, I was speaking at a youth leadership conference, and at the end, this young lady raised her hand and stood up, and she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Sure." And she's like, "So let me just start with, both of my parents are life coaches, and I realize there's no such thing as problems. There's only opportunities to learn and grow." And my wife and I looked at each other, and both of our eyes got huge, and we were like, "Oh shit, I hope this isn't our kid in 12 years." There's no such thing as problems. There's only opportunities to grow. But she's like, "Can't you just have a problem every now and then and enjoy it?" And I laughed so hard because I was like, God, I hope I don't do that to my kid. The piece I hope that he learns and I learn is just to enjoy life as it is. Like, we have these little tricks of the mind or ways in which we can improve our psychology and emotions, and they're all wonderful. But sometimes the greatest gift is just being in how it is in the moment and learning to enjoy it. Learning to enjoy how it is. It ain't perfect, might not be what you want, but you've learned how to enjoy what is. Then how to make it better. How to then set a target and say, okay, I love what is. Now that's what I want to do. I'm going to figure out how to do it. And that's a life philosophy. You can see it on those watching the video, learn it, live it, give it, which is whatever you want in life. All you got to do is go learn what it takes to get it. Figure it out. Use the internet. Go find someone who's done it, but gather the knowledge or a blueprint of what works. How has people been able to accomplish that? Live it, apply it, practice. Go fail 1,000 times until you finally figure it out and get it right. And then give it. Once you really dialed it in and figured it out, and you can pull the lever, get the result, pull the lever, get the result, pay it forward. Share it with someone else and say, hey, I figured this out. It works for me. Let me see if I can get it to work for you. An example of this, I wanted to figure out what it learned, what it took to have a business of my own and not have to work for other people. And so I went on my own. I started a little coaching practice, got it up and running, made $100,000 in 8 months, felt like I was king of the world at 24 years old. Fast forward, lots of lumps and bumps of figuring it out along the way. Eventually had what I thought was my best year in business. We did 22 events in 22 cities around the world, from London to Los Angeles to Stockholm, Australia, Canada, the US. We were everywhere. Japan, Tokyo. We thought I killed it. Sat down with my accountant at the end of the year, and he said, "How do you think you did?" I was like, "Best ever. Like, this is amazing. We did more revenue and made more of an impact and touched more people. It was incredible." And he said, "Buddy, who taught you financial literacy?" And I was like, "What's that?" and he pulled up my P&L and he said, "I don't know how to say this nicely. You would have made more money if you worked at McDonald's all year." And I was like, "Well, that's rude." And he's like, "Let me say it a different way. You paid to work all year. Like, you paid your business to work all year." I was like, "What are you saying? It just sounds like mean words coming out of your mouth." And he laughed and he said, "You understand how to help people, but you don't understand business." I went, oof. And so I followed this process, learn, live, give. I said, okay, who can I go learn this process from? And I sat down and I wrote down a whole list of people who I really respected in the business place, who were teaching it as well, not just doing it, but willing to share. And I found one I really connected with. And he was one of those guys where he's like, "I'll help you. I'm not going to sell you. Like, you want to work with me, it's a hefty fee. I'll show you what works, and you're going to have to do the damn work." I was like, I like this. He's not trying to pitch me on some stuff. He's like, "I'll help you, but here's what it takes." So I started working with him probably 9 years ago now. And the first few years was just learning stuff I wasn't good at and being willing to be horrible at it, but just being horrible, learning, trying. And then it started to click. And all of a sudden, we were able to grow one of our businesses 143% in a couple of years. And then we started making more profit in a month than we used to make in a year. And I was like, oh, shoot, this is just amazing. And then we started to actually build a team and create the right systems where our team could do it. And I didn't have to be the one doing stuff all day long. And I was like, oh, man, this is amazing. And then at one point, he said, I think you're ready to show other people how to do this. And I went, really? I don't know. And he's like, you got it. Try it. Try helping somebody. And so I got to graduate to the third one, which was Give It, where I got to share what I had learned and share what I had practiced and honed in my own business. And then it worked. We were able to help them grow their businesses 50% during, even COVID. And that year we grew a business 50% in revenue. We grew at 179% in profitability and 197% in net profit. And it was like, wow. And then it started to click. I'm like, oh, there's just certain levers you have to learn how to pull. And when you do, you figured out how to fly the plane called a business. And so this process of learning what it takes to do it, practicing relentlessly until you really have lived it and you got it, and then practicing paying it forward in the Give It section where you're able to share it with others and help them do it as well.
I love those. We've kind of covered the questions, and it's interesting how this conversation goes sometimes. I know we've got to wrap up in just a few minutes because you've got your next client call. But before we go, there are people listening in, they're not in that great place, right? They may not have been to the great training, haven't had the great background, whatever it is. And they're here listening going, I want to pause, stop, reset my life and business. What's your top tip for somebody listening in going, I got it. I love that I can accept what is, but how do I move forward? What's the top tip to actually help them on their path?
What are they trying to move forward in?
They're not happy with where they're at. So oftentimes they can be, the classic example, the banker's earning 200 grand a year, but they're miserable and depressed. It could be the housewife, never had a job. It could be anything, but there's people in that state that they know they want to reset. They were like, I'm clear, I want to shift, right? Like your dad back in the day, enough, but they don't know how. And there's so much noise now with TikTok, Threads, YouTube, Insta. Everybody is a quote unquote guru, but it's hard to know what's actually a useful advice to take sometimes, right? So what would be your top tip somebody wants to shift and reset their life?
Well, you got to remember that lady. If you're striving for balance, you're striving for broke. No, don't listen to bullshit like that, please. The starting point for anyone is getting really clear. I've helped people make those transitions a lot. I'll take a banker at Goldman Sachs. He was actually pretty happy. It just wasn't what he wanted to ultimately do long term. He had worked his way all the way up to managing director, which was a really big deal. He'd been there for almost a decade, and he was working in the office in London at the time. And I asked him, I said, what is your ideal life and day vision? Meaning, if you could have it all your way, take out a pen and paper and say, if I could have it all my way, ... and then write down, here is how I'd live my daily life. Here's where I'd wake up. Here's where I'd go. Here's how I'd feel. Here's who'd be there. Here's what we do. Here's where we go. Here's what I'd want to be part of. Here's what I'd want to contribute and create. Here's where I'd have lunch. Here's who would come to lunch with us. All the details. So he did. And he opened it up and I said, read it to me. And he read it to me. And he was waking up in the countryside at his home and standing outside in nature and then going for a run on the beach and then coming home to his wife and kids who would greet him when he came in, and she'd be off to a workout class and the kids would be headed for school or summer camp or something. And then he'd have his office in his home office with this incredible view, and he'd be working on a project he's passionate about and doing all these things. And then he, at night, they would all come together and have family dinner, and then the kids would do their thing, and him and his wife would snuggle up and have this romantic evening. And I was like, that sounds amazing. He's like, well, couple problems. I'm not married. I'm dating someone that I really like, but I'm not married. I live in central London and I work at a major bank. Like, there's concrete everywhere. I don't have the ocean. And I was like, well, shit, we got some work to do, huh? And he started laughing. He's like, you really think this will work? I was like, sure, we can do it if you want to, but we're going to have to create a plan. Let's say that's 10 years out. What does 5 years need to look like? What does 3 years need to look like? What does 1 year need to look like? What do we need to do in the next 6 months to start moving towards this? What decisions we make, what investments, what moves in your life? And then let's get down to some habits. What are a few daily habits and routines we need to start putting in place, not for the sake of just trying to have a good daily routine, but for the sake of, no, I've done the math and I know by doing this little increment of progress each day, it keeps me on track for 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And I'm literally building block by block my 10-year life vision every day by putting in a little bit of effort. What's wild, fast forward 3 years, we were having a coaching call together and he told me, he goes, I need to read you something and it's going to blow your mind. And this guy had moved from London to the New York office, to the Houston office, to the New York. I mean, they had moved him all over the place and all kinds of stuff. Eventually he left. Eventually he started his own company, helped him raise $250 million for it. All these different things that happened. And he read me his day and he says, what's insane about this is it's what I just did today. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm at my house in the Hamptons. I had gone to his wedding a few years before that. He's like, I'm married, pregnant with a little one on the way. I just went for a run on the beach. I just got home. I'm headed to my office. I'm sitting in my office right now talking to you, working on this amazing business that I'm pumped about. And like word for word, it was real. And he was like, damn, that's crazy. He goes, that's crazy, dude. And I said, Asterix, have you updated the vision?
I love
he
that.
started laughing. He's like, shit, that's why I pay you, huh? And I was like, no, that's a simple question. Like, have you updated it? Now that you're living this one, what's next? What's next? You can't just do the same shit the rest of your life. You get bored. Where do you want to go from here? And so it's a process. And so what I tell someone if they feel like they're stuck, start with a vision. If you need help with that, go grab a copy of my book. It's literally the process that's baked into the book. Chapter 1, get clear on the vision. Chapter 2 and 3, get clear on the most important parts of the majors of life. Chapters 3 through 11 is how to turn your vision to reality. Chapter 12 is now that you got one perfect day, now turn it into a perfect life vision and expand that to all the other categories of your life over the next 10 years.
I love it. We have to wrap up in a minute. What I love about you is you've been playing the game I've been playing, but on sort of the team, but indirectly, right? We're all here to make a big difference. It isn't about making more money. We've all met, not everybody yet, but you'll meet somebody who's a billionaire and they're miserable and not nice people. And you'll meet somebody with nothing who's an amazing soul and touches your lives. And I'm sure you know this quote, being the richest man in the graveyard is not our job. My fascinating thing, I'm a bit older than you now. I don't know if I've got a day left or 100 years left. But if we can make the differences one day at a time, it can make all that difference. So, and that reminder about the decade, I know I got that from Jim, thinking 10 years out, it's such a transformation. And I worked in banking at PwC auditing. Nobody talks about it. We're all in next quarter, next quarter, next quarter. There is no bigger question about it, right? So thank you for showing up as you have been. People want to find out more about what you're doing. What's the best way for them to connect with you? JarekRobbins.com, I'm guessing.
Yeah, just go to my website, JarekRobbins.com. We're updating it right this second. So we're going to have basically two paths. The path for people who are working on their life, so either their health, relationships, career, or wealth, Core 4 Challenge. People working on their businesses, they can go to our business accelerator. So do you want a better life or a better business? Either one, click it, go down that path, and we'll sort you out and make sure we put you in the right direction.
I love it. And there's a lot of interesting things we haven't got to today with strategic alliances and joint ventures coming together that have been decades in the planning. So I really want to thank you for what you shared. I love that thing from your grandmother, I think it was, about it's not the hand you're dealt, but how you play it. And there's so many other gems of genius in here. Go check out Jarek's book. And Jarek, final word for you as we end up the show. Anything you want to leave us with as we close out Pause Stop Reset today?
Shazam!
Shazam.
Word of the day.
TM. Love to the family. We'll see you soon. And check out Jarek's new work and what he's doing. There's so much great value out there. Check out the show online and we'll see you next time for Pause Stop Reset. Thank you for listening. Bye for now. Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause Stop Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pause.reset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.